The French Riviera has always been a place of profound healing, romantic resets, and miraculous reunions for Steffy Forrester Finnegan and her devoted husband, John Finn Finnegan. Monaco, with its breathtaking azure Mediterranean waters, luxurious mega-yachts, and warm, golden sunshine, was supposed to be the ultimate sanctuary for the weary couple. It was the exact, magical location where they found their way back to each other in the emotional climax of 2022, after the entire world falsely believed Finn was dead. This current European trip was meticulously designed to be a romantic reset, a desperate and necessary escape from the suffocating corporate warfare tearing their families apart in Los Angeles, and more importantly, an escape from the ever-present, looming shadow of the diabolical Sheila Carter. However, the picturesque tranquility of this European paradise is about to be violently and irrevocably shattered, transforming a dream vacation into a waking psychological nightmare that will test the very limits of Steffy's sanity and the foundation of her marriage. The stark, jarring contrast between the breathtaking, sun-drenched beauty of Monaco and the dark, twisted psychological horror unfolding in Steffy's traumatized mind creates a narrative tension that is both captivating and utterly heartbreaking to witness. To truly understand the sheer magnitude of the psychological crisis Steffy is currently facing, one must look back at the most traumatic, life-altering event of her entire existence: the horrific double shooting in the dark, filthy, rain-slicked alley behind Il Giardino. That fateful night, the cold, unforgiving concrete was permanently stained with the blood of both husband and wife, a brutal, visceral testament to Sheila Carter's unhinged malice and desperate cruelty. Steffy watched in paralyzed, agonizing horror as Finn, the love of her life, selflessly stepped in front of a bullet meant for her, sacrificing his own life to save hers. She then experienced the excruciating, burning agony of a bullet tearing through her own flesh as Sheila callously silenced her desperate, sobbing pleas for medical help. The unimaginable trauma of that night did not simply fade away when the physical wounds healed and the scars faded. It burrowed deep into the darkest corners of Steffy's subconscious, leaving her with severe, untreated post-traumatic stress disorder. For years, she has fought a silent, exhausting battle to suppress the terrifying memories, building massive emotional walls to protect her family and her own fragile sanity. But trauma is a patient, insidious predator, waiting for the perfect moment of vulnerability to strike, and the isolation of being far from home provides the ideal hunting ground for her suppressed demons to finally break free. Initially, the Monaco getaway offers a fleeting, beautiful illusion of absolute safety and peace. Walking hand in hand along the ancient cobblestone streets, listening to the gentle, rhythmic crash of the waves against the pristine shore, Steffy tries to force her tense muscles to relax. She wants desperately to believe that the massive ocean between her and Los Angeles is an impenetrable, protective barrier that Sheila Carter cannot possibly cross. But this fragile peace is built on a foundation of devastating, toxic deception. What Steffy does not know, and what will soon tear her world apart, is that her ultimate nightmare is already sharing the exact same European air. Finn, the man she trusts implicitly to protect her from all harm, is harboring a massive, dangerous secret that threatens to destroy everything they have rebuilt. Sheila Carter was on his commercial flight to Europe. In a moment of panicked desperation midair, Finn made a catastrophic, misguided bargain with his biological mother, promising to keep her presence a secret from Steffy in exchange for Sheila's solemn vow to stay away. This lie of omission is a ticking time bomb, and its invisible, crushing weight is already suffocating their marriage from the inside out, long before the truth is even spoken. Finn's internal struggle is a tragic, painful display of misguided intentions and dangerous hubris. He genuinely believes that by hiding Sheila's proximity, he is shielding his fragile wife from unnecessary anxiety and panic. He wants to be the ultimate white knight, managing the terrifying threat quietly in the shadows so Steffy can enjoy their romantic reset without a care in the world. However, Finn fundamentally misunderstands the insidious nature of severe trauma and the absolute, non-negotiable necessity of complete transparency in a marriage recovering from such profound violence. His silence is not a protective shield. It is a profound betrayal of her trust. Every time he smiles at Steffy over a candlelit dinner, every time he pulls her close in the Mediterranean breeze and whispers that she is completely safe, he is compounding the deception. The universe has a cruel, inevitable way of exposing the truth, and Finn's naive, foolish belief that he can control a volatile, obsessive psychopath like Sheila Carter is about to blow up in his face, leaving his unsuspecting wife to pay the ultimate psychological price for his mistakes. The peaceful timeline in Monaco begins to fracture subtly at first, as Steffy's subconscious picks up on the unspoken, nervous tension radiating from her husband. Survivors of severe, life-threatening trauma often develop a hypervigilance, an intuitive, highly attuned radar that detects danger even before the conscious mind can fully process the threat. Steffy notices the way Finn constantly, nervously checks his surroundings, the slight, guilty hesitation in his voice when he speaks about their future, the fleeting shadows of regret that cross his eyes when he thinks she is not looking. She tries to attribute her growing, inexplicable unease to jet lag, the time difference, or the residual stress of the Forrester Creations corporate war back home, but the cold dread continues to pool heavily in the pit of her stomach. The glorious, warm Mediterranean sun begins to feel strangely oppressive, and the rhythmic sound of the ocean waves starts to sound like the rushing of blood in her own ears. The luxurious paradise she sought is slowly, terrifyingly warping into a gilded cage, and she cannot figure out why she feels so incredibly trapped and exposed. The true, horrifying descent into psychological hell begins with the auditory and visual hallucinations. It starts subtly, almost imperceptibly, a flash of auburn hair in the corner of her eye that vanishes when she turns, the distinct, terrifying sound of high heels clicking ominously on the cobblestone that perfectly mimics the approaching footsteps in the dark alley. Steffy tries desperately to shake it off, gripping the ornate iron railing of their hotel balcony and forcing herself to breathe in the salty sea air, telling herself she is just exhausted. But the human mind, once fractured by profound trauma, is a fragile, unpredictable thing. The hallucinations rapidly escalate in severity and frequency. Over the cheerful, ambient chatter of tourists and the clinking of expensive champagne glasses at a nearby outdoor cafe, Steffy suddenly hears the deafening, unmistakable crack of a gunshot. She flinches violently, her hands flying to cover her ears, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped, panicked bird. The beautiful, vibrant scenery before her dissolves completely, replaced for a terrifying fraction of a second by the cold, wet, blood-stained brick walls of the Il Giardino alley and the sickening, metallic smell of fresh blood. The absolute breaking point, the moment that shatters her reality completely, occurs on the pristine, sun-drenched beach of the French Riviera. Steffy is attempting to take a solitary, grounding walk along the water's edge, hoping the rhythmic motion of the tide will quiet her spiraling, chaotic thoughts. As she gazes down the long stretch of golden shoreline, her eyes lock onto a silhouette in the distance. It is a woman, standing perfectly still, staring directly in her direction. The woman's posture, the dark clothing contrasting sharply with the bright, colorful beach, the unmistakable, chilling aura of menace. It all screams Sheila Carter. Whether this is actually the real Sheila stalking her from afar, breaking her promise to Finn, or a cruel, terrifying trick of Steffy's traumatized mind projecting her absolute worst fears onto an innocent stranger, the result is instantaneous and catastrophic. The fragile mental dam holding back years of suppressed terror completely bursts, flooding Steffy's nervous system with an overwhelming, toxic surge of adrenaline and absolute, paralyzing panic. The resulting post-traumatic stress disorder flare-up is violent, visceral, and all-consuming. Steffy's vision tunnels drastically, the vibrant, beautiful colors of the French Riviera washing out into the muted, terrifying grays and blacks of that fateful night in Los Angeles. She can literally feel the phantom pain of the bullet tearing into her side, a burning, agonizing sensation that makes her gasp and double over in the soft sand. She desperately gasps for air, but her lungs refuse to expand, trapped in the suffocating grip of a severe, debilitating panic attack. The soothing sound of the crashing waves transforms in her mind into the sound of her own desperate, gurgling screams for help as she watched her husband bleed out on the trash-strewn pavement. In this horrifying moment, she is no longer a powerful, confident Forster CEO on a luxurious European vacation. She is once again the helpless, terrified victim bleeding out in the dark, waiting for a monster to finish the job. Consumed entirely by this horrifying, vivid flashback, Steffy loses all semblance of rational control. Her behavior becomes erratic, frantic, and deeply concerning. She stumbles backward, scrambling desperately away from the distant figure on the beach, her eyes wide with unadulterated, primal terror. She bumps wildly into passing tourists, completely oblivious to their concerned, alarmed, and confused stares, her mind entirely disconnected from her physical surroundings. She is trapped in a massive fight-or-flight response, and her traumatized brain is screaming at her to flee for her life. The poised, elegant executive is completely gone, replaced by a broken woman fighting for her very survival against an invisible, relentless enemy. She runs blindly off the beach, her breath coming in ragged, jagged gasps, her only coherent thought to find a dark place to hide from the nine-toed devil that has haunted her every waking moment for years. Finn, who had been anxiously searching for her after realizing she had wandered off, witnesses the tail end of this horrifying public breakdown. He sees the sheer, unadulterated terror contorting his wife's beautiful face and sprints toward her, his heart leaping into his throat. He reaches out to grab her trembling shoulders, to pull her tightly into his chest, and offer the fierce protection he so desperately wants to provide. He expects her to collapse gratefully into his arms, to seek immediate refuge in the warm embrace that has always been her ultimate safe harbor. He expects to be the loving hero who talks her down from the terrifying ledge of her panic, whispering reassurances that the nightmare is over and that she is safe with him. But the profound tragedy of this moment is that Finn's physical presence does not bring comfort. Instead, it brings an intense, terrifying escalation of her anxiety. When Finn's hands touch her skin, Steffy recoils violently, ripping herself away from his grasp as if his hands are made of burning, searing coals. In her heightened, hypervigilant state, Steffy's survival instincts are screaming that something is profoundly, dangerously wrong with the man standing before her. She looks at her husband, the man who literally took a bullet for her, and instead of seeing her savior, she sees the dark deception hiding behind his worried eyes. She may not know the exact, specific details of his mid-air bargain with Sheila, but her traumatized soul senses the massive lie he is carrying. The essential foundation of absolute, unquestioning trust that is required for her to feel safe with him has been fundamentally fractured by his secret. This visceral rejection is a devastating, potentially fatal blow to the Shin marriage. Steffy looks at Finn and suddenly sees the biological son of her attempted murderer, a man who, despite his best intentions, is currently radiating a dangerous, secretive, and untrustworthy energy. The realization hits her with the force of a physical blow to the chest. If she cannot trust Finn to be completely honest with her about the one thing that terrifies her most, then she is truly, utterly alone in this fight for her life. His lies of omission have cruelly stripped away her last line of emotional defense. Finn's desperate, pleading attempts to soothe her only exacerbate her spiraling panic, because every word of comfort he offers feels hollow, fake, and tainted by the massive secret he is actively keeping. She pushes him away with surprising force, her eyes wild and accusing, treating her husband not as a loving protector, but as a potential threat who has actively compromised her safety. Driven by pure, primal terror and the heartbreaking, isolating realization that she cannot even trust her own husband, Steffy flees the scene, running frantically back to their luxury hotel. The opulent, gilded corridors of the Monaco resort blur past her as she runs, the ornate decorations and expensive artwork looking like twisted, menacing shapes in her panicked peripheral vision. She bursts into their expansive suite, her chest heaving violently, the the phantom, acrid smell of gunpowder still burning intensely in her nostrils. The paradise vacation has entirely dissolved into ash, leaving her trapped in a psychological hell that is far more terrifying than any physical location could ever be. She is a prisoner of her own traumatized mind, locked in a never-ending, agonizing loop of the most traumatic moment of her life, unable to distinguish the past from the present. Her survival instinct takes complete, absolute control of her actions. Steffy slams the heavy, solid wooden door of the hotel suite shut, her trembling, sweaty hands fumbling frantically with the deadbolt and the heavy metal security chain. But basic locks are not enough to quell the screaming, deafening panic in her brain. Sheila Carter had easily bypassed security before. She had broken into their home, into their lives, with terrifying, murderous ease. Steffy needs a fortress. With a sudden surge of adrenaline-fueled, desperate strength, she begins to physically barricade the door. She shoves a heavy, velvet armchair against the wood, drags a solid oak side table over, piling heavy furniture in a frantic, obsessive bid to create an impenetrable physical barrier between herself and the monsters, both real and imagined, lurking in the hallways outside. But a barricade is only a temporary delay. She knows she needs to be ready to fight for her life. Steffy's wild eyes dart around the luxurious, impeccably decorated room, searching desperately for anything that can be used as a lethal weapon to defend herself. She spots a heavy, solid brass lamp on the bedside table, rips the cord from the wall, and wraps her hands tightly around its thick base. She retreats to the furthest, darkest corner of the room, positioning herself so she has a clear, unobstructed view of the barricaded door. She sinks to the floor, pulling her knees tightly to her chest, the heavy brass weapon clutched so tightly in her hands that her knuckles turn stark white. Her breathing is shallow, rapid, and ragged. Her eyes are wide, unblinking, and fixed intensely on the brass door handle. She is armed, utterly terrified, and fully prepared to unleash a lethal, violent defense against absolutely anyone who dares to cross that threshold. The tragic, heartbreaking irony of the situation is profound and devastating. Steffy Forrester Finnegan, a woman of immense wealth, corporate power, and global influence, is sitting on the floor of a five-star luxury suite in one of the most beautiful, exclusive cities in the world, yet she is experiencing the exact same helpless, agonizing terror she felt bleeding out in a filthy, forgotten alleyway. The psychological hell she is enduring is a grim testament to the enduring, destructive power of untreated trauma and the devastating, catastrophic consequences of broken trust in a marriage. Sheila Carter does not even need to be physically in the room to destroy Steffy's life. The mere specter of her existence, compounded and amplified by Finn's foolish deception, is more than enough to completely shatter Steffy's reality and drive her to the brink of madness. Outside the heavily barricaded door, Finn stands in the luxurious hallway, his heart breaking into a million pieces as he listens to the horrifying sounds of heavy furniture scraping across the floor and his wife's muffled, panicked, hyperventilating sobs. He knocks gently, pleading desperately through the thick wood, begging her to let him in, promising over and over that she is safe and that he loves her. But his desperate words cannot penetrate the thick, impenetrable walls of her PTSD episode, nor can they erase the dangerous lie he is actively living. The standoff is a heartbreaking, poignant visual representation of the massive emotional chasm that has opened between them. Finn is locked out, not just physically from the room, but emotionally from his wife's heart, paying the agonizing, unbearable price for his naive, arrogant belief that he could manage a monster like Sheila Carter in secret. As the warm Mediterranean sun sets outside the window, casting long, dark, menacing shadows across the barricaded hotel room, Steffy remains completely frozen in her corner, the heavy brass lamp clutched like a lifeline in her hands. The peaceful, romantic timeline in Monaco has been permanently eradicated, replaced by a desperate, terrifying fight for psychological survival. The immense damage done to her fragile psyche and the devastating, potentially irreparable wedge driven into her marriage by Finn's deception will not be easily repaired, if it can be repaired at all. When the door finally opens, whether it is Finn seeking desperate forgiveness or the very real, physical threat of Sheila Carter stepping out of the shadows to finish the job, Steffy is prepared to fight to the death. The terrifying ghosts of the past have fully resurrected, and in this suffocating psychological hell, only one thing is certain. Steffy Forrester Finnegan will never, ever allow herself to be a helpless victim again.